G'day and welcome to Space Engineers. This is the beginning of a series of tutorials where I'm hoping to guide new players from the bottom of the learning cliff to the top with as few accidental explosions along the way as possible. So to begin with, we're going to click on New Game, and in this menu you've got a few options. If you're someone who hasn't played many first-person controlled games before, I'd suggest going to Original Content and then finding the first jump. This scenario will guide you through things like basic movement controls, jumping, jetpack, those sorts of things, in a really quite well done way. And I think it's a much better way of learning those controls because it's directly interactive. Once you've done that, jump back to Sandbox, and we're going to select Star System, or for those not on Steam, Home System, and we're going to click Customize, just so that we can change the name of our save. On the right hand side here, you'll see that there are a lot of different options. These options can be changed dynamically on your save for nearly all of them, so don't worry about them. The defaults are actually pretty okay for you to begin with, so we can just leave them as they are and click Start. When you load in, you'll come spinning down in this rover, and if you press V, you can look from the outside and you'll notice that it'll have potentially the same color as me, potentially a different color. When you spawn in, it's a bit of a random pick. We can look around. I'm in some sort of savanna area in deep canyons with big cliffs. This doesn't look too bad though, it looks like fairly good rover terrain. When we've dropped down, we can have a bit of a look at what we've got on our rover. We've got our cockpit at the front. We've got a battery down the side here. You can see there are 4 potential lights here. The 4 lights indicate levels of charge where if the light is on, it is above 25%, 50%, 75%, or it's at 100%. So at the moment, just looking at those lights, we can know that it's above 75%. We've got our survival kit on the back here. This needs to remain powered and intact for us to be able to respawn. If we lose this, we have to start fresh from a new rover. Our base may still survive if we've built one already, but we'll have to drive there because we'll have no means to get there otherwise. So look after your survival kit. Then you've got a bunch of other blocks in here which don't really matter for the moment, so we'll get to them later. Hop back in the cockpit, and there are a few things in the seat that we want to have a look at. If we press I, we can get our inventory up, and you can see that in the cockpit, we have a pistol, some ammunition, some kelp crisps, which we may need to eat later, and a data pad. In the data pad, there will be a GPS for a trade station nearby. If you're worried you might lose that data pad, you can right-click on it, click Create GPS Marker, click OK, then go to your GPS tab. You can enable it by double-clicking, otherwise it'll get deleted. And then you can turn off Show on HUD since we're not going to be going to that terribly soon. Then we can go back to our inventory screen, and we're going to transfer the pistol to our player's inventory. We can either click and drag things across, or if you want to move a whole stack, you can double-click. There are a few other keyboard shortcuts, which we'll get to later. So with our pistol in our player inventory, we can now hop out of the cockpit and add it to our hotbar. To add things to your player hotbar, you press G, which brings up this menu. We can find character weapons on the side here. And I'm going to drag this pistol into slot number 4. Then we'll reload, and this means if my butt starts to get bitten by some pesky wolf, I'll be able to turn around and give it some of its own medicine back. Even though it's sad, because doggo. And now to begin our mission to survive. What we need to do to begin with is to find some ores in the local area. This may take us some time. So to do something useful while we're searching, I'm going to grab my drill, I'm going to walk around to the back of the rover, I'm going to start drilling just straight down into the dirt, holding down F to pick up all these little boulders of rock that appear, and then we're going to get the survival kit to process these into usable materials. It may take a little while till your inventory is full. If you're finding it's getting a little bit dark while you're waiting for that inventory to fill, you can press L and turn on your suit lights, which may help things a bit. And you'll see that bar just above your hotbar getting into the red, and then you'll get the delightful inventory full. Now we can head back up to the surface, and for our survival kit, we can drop this stone in. And in looking at the survival kit, you can see that we come with 500 iron ingots, 50 nickel, and 50 silicon, which gives us a pretty solid start, but it's nice to give us an even better start. So we're going to drop the stone in there by double-clicking. We're then going to go to the production window, and we're going to tell the survival kit to start processing that stone. To do that, we come over to here to the Ingots tab, select Ingots, and to add this to the queue, you can click it once to add 1, you can control click to do 10, You can shift click to do 100, or you can control shift click to do 1000. I usually queue up just a bunch, knowing that I'm never gonna have to worry about it later. These same multipliers, the control for 10, shift for 100, control shift for 1000, work for transferring items between inventories as well, just like the double click does a full stack. When you put stone into your assembler, and we process it using the ingots processing, it will produce iron, nickel, and silicon. We need those for a lot of our components, so we're going to need to produce a lot of it, which is why we're going to try and make a bunch of it while we're driving around. In order to make it easier for us to drop our stone and get it processed by the survival kit, there's a little shortcut I'm going to show you, which is Alt, middle mouse, and you need to do that while the back of this survival kit is highlighted, that glowing yellow bit. If I turn away and do it here, nothing. If I do it here, it's going to deposit all possible components. That way I can grab a load of stone and drop it in the back of the survival kit really quite quickly. While digging down to collect stone, you may notice that once you get down to a stone texture like this, you will collect more materials. And that is the case. If you can find stones on the surface or an area that is rocky on the surface, you will get stone more quickly than having to dig through dirt to get it. Put a couple more loads in, and then we're going to go searching for ores. This just means the survival kit can process all this while we're doing our search, which saves us some time later. And drop that load in, and off we go. If I zoom out in third person and look around, what I'm trying to find is any little funny surface marking that looks like a desaturated grey patch. There is one just up ahead of me in amongst the sea of grass there. There's another over here in the sand. I'm going to drive to each of those so that we can get a closer look at what they look like, because these look different on different terrain types, and the grass ones are definitely amongst the hardest to see when you're starting out. In fact, they're hard to see when you're not starting out. They're just hard to see. When we drive near these surface markings, you'll see that your ore detector that's on your rover will start showing these markers on your HUD. You can see I've got silicon and magnesium. This is what we're trying to find. What we're trying to find to begin with is silicon and iron. If we can find those two deposits, we're pretty much set for building our base and getting things going. We've found silicon so far, which is great, but that's not why we're here. We're here to show you what this looks like. And if I zoom out, yeah, you might be able to pick that that's there. If you're struggling to find these markers, you can make it a little bit easier. Go to your graphics settings and turn off grass. And now you can see what the marking looks like much more easily. On the savanna golden yellow grass, it's a pale grey. On the green grass, it's a dark, almost black. And these surface markings can be found all over the planet. On snow, they'll be yellow. On the Mars-like planet, they'll be grey, which is really stark against the orange there. The easiest places, I think, to begin with to learn what these look like are Mars and ice lakes, because you've got much more uniform terrain textures, which makes them much easier to pick out. Now I'm going to turn my grass back on, and now that we know that there's silicon and magnesium here, we're just going to drive around a little bit more and see if there's a third, because there are often 3 that you can spot from the surface. 3 different types of ore. And it looks like it's silicon, magnesium, and ice in this one. So now we need to make a little marker so we know what's here and know that we don't need to come back to check this spot. To do that, we're going to press K, go to GPS, go to New from Current Position. We'll rename this to silicon, magnesium, and ice. Let's drive on to the next one. When driving between these ore markers, it's pretty difficult to roll this rover, but it's not impossible. Cue montage of me showing that it's not impossible. If you can manage to keep the speed under about 30 meters per second, you should be safe on most surfaces. But if it looks like the terrain is particularly rough, maybe best to drive around rather than through. If you do happen to roll and you thought you had a good start going and you've destroyed or damaged your survival kit, don't be afraid to press that F5 key or the equivalent on console to quick load, because you're learning. Just give yourself a little save scum. It's fine. If you haven't damaged anything but you're upside down, use the number 9 to override your gyroscope and flip yourself back onto your wheels. So we've come to this deposit and it says it's gold, and you can see when I zoom out that on the sand it's a much easier surface to spot this on. And now, to create this GPS, I'm going to show you a different technique. We're going to open up the chat window, type /GPS AUAG, and that's going to create that as a GPS marker, AU, AG. When you're starting out, I think there are 3 resources that we're looking for. We need to find silicon, we need to find iron, and we need to find cobalt. Cobalt is the only one of those that you absolutely must find in order to progress your game further, but we don't need it this early on. The silicon and iron are going to make it much easier for you to survive and to be able to build up the food processing you need so that you can survive. Now, if I have a look out here, oh, there's another deposit over there. Let's turn down that way and have a look. We've got magnesium. What else is in this one? Nickel. Open a spot, whatever the third one is, hoping it's silicon. There we go, silicon. So let's do that again. /GPS MGSINI. I can see another ore deposit in the distance, so I'll head towards that. And this one has cobalt. It's deep, but it has cobalt. What else has it got? Iron. Perfect. There we go. So we'll go /GPS FE and CO. So we know we've got iron, cobalt, magnesium, silicon, nickel, silver, and gold locations marked. There may be locations closer to us than some of the ones we've marked, but for the moment, I think that's pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off one of the ones that's a duplicate that's further away from my current location, and that's this one. Let's turn that off. And now I've only got the ones on my HUD that I need. This means we've now got the resources we need to actually start our base. Choosing a base location, to me, is mostly about where we're going to get the most sunlight. We can see that the sun is going to set roughly in that direction. That means we want to make sure that we're not in a valley where that sun is going to get blocked late in the afternoon or early in the morning. And actually the location of this iron deposit is pretty perfect. So if I build on top of it, I'm also going to be able to mine that iron really easily. So I'm going to just go up the hill a little bit and pick a spot that's still inside this grey area. And then we can start building our base. The survival kit's finished processing all that stone we dug up before. It processes in chunks of 100, so it'll always leave a little bit behind. That's no problem. To be able to start building our base, we can go to the production menu and we can build a few steel plate. There are cheaper ways to do this, but I'm going to show you this method because it gives you the most flexibility starting out, and I think that's helpful. So I'm going to order up 20 of those by control clicking twice. While it's making those, let's start our first little dig. I'm going to do it right at the back of the rover here. I'm going to dig down till I get to that stone using right click. This is terrain deletion mode or terrain clearing mode with the drill, and it means that I can drill down more deeply, more quickly, because I'm removing more of the voxel at the time, but I'm not getting any resources for it. The reason I'm happy to go deep early here is that this is sand. Sand does not have much stone, and I know I'm going to have to go deep to get the iron anyway. So I may as well drill this hole because it's going to be useful for other things. And oh boy, is the sand deep here. There we go. Starting to see some stone. There it is. So I'm going to grab stone, and while I use the survival kit to manufacture things, I'm going to periodically grab extra loads of stone so that I keep resupplying it with the materials it needs for the new components I'm making. When I'm drilling out these holes so that I can walk out of them, so I don't need to use my jetpack, what I do is I press C, so I'm crouching, and then I hold down right click and move forward all the time, making sure that each time a bit of the voxel clears, I move forward with it, so that I keep drilling at an angle until I can get a nice safe path down. If you find that you've dug too steep, you can usually on your way back up, just right click and clear out a path while standing up, and you'll be able to make a nice easier path to walk if you've accidentally made a bit too steep. We're going to do Alt middle mouse to drop all that in, and then we're going to grab out our 20 steel plate. Now remembering that the sun is setting over there, which means it's going to rise pretty much exactly opposite, what I'm going to do is press G, and I'm going to go back to my home menu, and I'm going to put the armor block back on my hotbar. I made sure to grab the one with this little plus symbol because that one includes all these different variants underneath it when I select it on my hotbar. So it's actually giving me 6 blocks on my hotbar, not just 1. So if I select that by pressing 5, I can then use the mouse scroll wheel to change the type of block I'm building with. We want the full block at the moment, and I want to be pretty much square on to that sun so that my algae farms can get the maximum sunlight from dawn until dusk when they're aligned. For those wondering, yes, there are ways to make these track the sun later on, but that's a bit more advanced, so we won't be covering that today. To place our first block, we have it in our hotbar. We make sure that it is slightly embedded in the ground because we want this to be locked to the ground. So I'm going to place the first block there, place a couple more off to the sides, Place a little ramp here so that I can walk up onto it. And then down this end, I'm going to make a little tower. I can't get up to this next bit, so I'm going to turn on my jetpack and start flying up. When placing blocks, make sure they snap to the block you're trying to attach them to. Placing a block like this is not attached. Those are not the same grid. That does not count as the same build, so you cannot pass anything between those two without more advanced techniques. So we don't want that. What we want is to have these snap. Like you can see, it's snapping, it's fixed to this. So we're going to build that up about 10 blocks high. Doesn't need to be perfect. Close enough is good enough here. So go up to about there. And then at the top here, I'm going to build something a little bit funny. I'm going to add a block around on each side, except I'm a couple of steel plates short. So let's make some more of those. Control click, make another 10. My hydrogen is now down to 41%. To refill that, we can just hop back in the cockpit and it'll fill back up. Make sure you don't let that drop too low while you're flying up high. You will die. So we'll grab those steel plate, place the remaining 2 blocks. And this tower we're building, that is for our wind turbines, which are going to be our primary power supply here. And wind turbines need to be clear of the ground and structures around them. That's why we built a tower. So we're going to get the survival kit to build us the materials for at least 2 of those. Ideally, we're going to start with 3. If we select the wind turbine on our hotbar, we can see the materials that it requires to be built. So we can then go into the production menu and order those up. We've had 10 interior plate, we have 8 motors, we have 20 construction components, we have 24 girders, and we have 2 computers. And then at the top, we have another 30 interior plate. Those aren't strictly required for this turbine to be functional. So we're going to kind of cheap out and not make them. So we can see that we have enough materials in our assembler to make all this. So let's order up the batch for the next ones. 10 of these, 20 of those, 24 of these, 8 of these, and 2 of those. And we've still got enough material, so let's order up enough for another one. If you accidentally order something up over here that you don't want, you can right click on it to delete it, and then just order it up again. This method of ordering up materials is very slow, but I think of this as my fallback method. There are other methods that are much quicker, and I've got a video linked that'll show you how to do all of those. They just have some caveats that are a bit much for when you're starting out. But my plan is to sprinkle them through and gradually build up a much quicker way of doing things as we progress through this series. Or of course, you can go to that other video and just get them right now. So let's have a look at our inventory. We've got our 10 interior plates, motors, construction components, girders, and computers. So we can place at least one of these and fully weld it up. So let's go and put one on the top of the tower. And you can see those top interior plates are empty, yet our wind turbine is fully working. So let's go and grab the parts for the next one if they've been made as well. Not quite. Since we're waiting for things to be made, let's go drill some stone. We're going to need more resources, so we may as well collect them while we're waiting. Using our Alt middle mouse to dump everything, we'll also drop those couple of components we had picked up before. You may also notice that we've stopped producing parts because our processing of the stone is happening first. If you don't want that to be the case, you can actually click and drag that to the end of the queue, and this way it'll produce all these components before it tries to deal with any of that stone. And now we can grab the parts for the next wind turbine. I don't want to put the extra interior plate in. So to quickly grab just 10 of those, as I mentioned before, control click to grab 10. We can double click on each of the other stacks to grab the rest. And there we go, we can hop up and we're going to place the next one on one of these little spokes that's sticking out. You might be wondering what's the disadvantage to not putting those interior plate at the top of the wind turbine? Well, it's less durable. The block durability in Space Engineers is defined by the components that are in the block. So these light armor blocks that are just frames, they're very, very weak. If you knocked into them, you could easily break them and knock down your whole wind turbine. Which wouldn't be great, but for the material savings in the early game, it's worth taking that risk. So now that I've got the components for the last wind turbine, I'm going to fly up there and pop it down. Doesn't matter if you place it on this side or this side, you can place it all around. My plan is to actually cover all of these sides with wind turbines eventually. It's a nice compact way to get a quick, stable supply of power. Wind power isn't perfectly stable though. It has its ups and downs, and that's why we want to have a bit of an extra buffer to ensure we can run our refinery and assembler, which is what we're going to build next. So for our refinery, we're going to build a basic refinery, and we're going to build this first. The reason we're building this first is because it can refine ores and the survival kit can't. And ores are going to get us much, much more material, much, much more quickly, which is fantastic. So just like we did for the wind turbines, I'm going to have a look at what the basic refinery requires and go and add 100 steel plate, which is shift click. We're going to add 20 construction components, 10 motors, and 10 computers. You can see now that our iron ingots required compared to available, there's a disparity. We need about an extra 450-ish more iron. So I'm going to need to mine some more stone. But once we have this refinery and we need more iron, we can refine iron. Now, if you'd spent more time drilling while you were searching for ores and less time yapping than I did, you might not have to do quite as many trips as I've had to do while waiting for the materials for the basic refinery. One of the other things that's useful to do while you're driving around is search for food. I didn't spot any, but that's because I was probably blind and they were probably right there staring me in the face. But right now I'm going to show you a few clips of what some of the foods you might find around look like. There's vegetables, grain, mushrooms, and fruit. These are quite handy to find early on because they'll lengthen the amount of time you have before your food bar runs out and before the food supply in your cockpit runs out. Between the kelp crisps and the 100 food you start with, you've got about 2.5 hours before your food will run out, before you need to find another source to go with. Some of those food sources will come to you, and that's why we've got a pistol on our hotbar. Some of them you'll have to find yourself. You might be looking at these build requirements for each of these blocks and being like, why does he know that you only need so much for them? Typically speaking, the top component in the list is not required for functionality for most of these blocks. So you can get away with just the components below that if you want to just get something barely functional. Knowing that I'm going to get enough materials, I'm now going to keep drilling down until I can make a path to that iron. So just like before, I'm crouched down with C, and I'm just moving forward between each time that the drill removes some rock. Trying to line myself up with that iron marker. I'm just going to keep drilling toward it. And of course, sometimes it'll move. A few times. You can either redirect to it each time it moves, just to be sure, or hope that your sense of direction is good enough and you'll be able to head towards the original marker if it was the closest. I tend to not trust myself, so I go towards whichever marker is currently showing. Here we go. We see some iron ore. Excellent. I'll grab a load of that to take up with me. Switch to left click drilling and holding F so that I pick up stuff as it drops. Now when you're mining ore, you may find, if you look in your inventory, you also pick up a bunch of stone. In this instance, that's not so bad, but if you don't want to keep that stone, you can click and drag it onto this drop item button, or just drag it anywhere outside this window and it'll drop on the ground. You can then go back to picking up ore. So I've got some iron ore there I can pick up. I can drill a little bit more and hopefully get just iron ore in my inventory. Like so. Since I've got a long way to walk back, I kind of don't want to be carrying stone all that way when I could be carrying something much more useful. Okay, looks like everything's made. Let's drop that iron ore into the cargo here. It doesn't actually go into the survival kit. When we drop it, it's going into the cockpit because the survival kit is connected to the cockpit via conveyors. And the survival kit can't actually hold ores. It has a restricted number of things that it can actually handle. So let's grab all those components out and we'll build our basic refinery. I'm going to build it up on a little bit of a platform here, and I think I'll put it just about there. Then switch to my welder on one and weld it up. And by building basic refinery, you have unlocked new blocks. What that's talking about is the progression tree. If we bring up our block menu again, you can see that at the top here we have blocks and progression. If we switch to the progression tab, you'll see that there'll be a block like the basic assembler, and then a bunch of other blocks that branch off from it. And then there may be some other blocks that branch off from those. In order to unlock a block that's in any of these groups, you have to look at where it branches back to and build that block. So if I build the assembler, it'll then allow me to build lights. If I build lights, they will then allow me to build projectors, and so on. So as another example, if I built the assembler, it's going to allow me to build batteries. By building batteries, it's going to allow me to build beacons. By building beacons, it's going to allow me to build antennas. And by building antennas, I can then build broadcast controllers. So you need to build the block before in the tree. You can use the search bar here, so say I'm like, how do I build a gyroscope? Oh, I can search for it. Gyroscopes are here. So I can look and go, all right, to build a gyroscope, I need to build any sort of cockpit or control seat. So what do I need to be able to build one of those? Well, we scroll back up. Oh, I need to build a landing gear or a mag plate. Okay, that makes sense. With the basic refinery built, I can now pop in the iron ore that I collected. And it's going to refine that into iron at much better rates than what I got from putting stone into the survival kit. So we're going to grab the iron back out of the cockpit, now that we've got somewhere to put it, and drop it into the refinery. You can see how quickly we're getting a lot more iron, which is fantastic, because the next thing we're building is an assembler. So I'm going to grab this iron back out of the basic refinery, double click on that, bring it into my personal inventory, and bring it over here to the survival kit. And then we're going to drop it into the survival kit. And you might at this point be wondering, why didn't I just connect the refinery to the survival kit? Why do I have to ferry this by hand? Well, that's because in Space Engineers, there are two grid sizes. There is small grid, where we work in 50 by 50 by 50 centimeter cubes. And then there is large grid, where we work in 2.5 meter cubes. Large grid and small grid blocks do not connect directly to one another. You need to use special blocks called connectors to link them together. So you can see when I have this basic refinery out, I can't actually get it to snap to my small grid rover at all, but it will happily snap to my large grid building over here. When you want to find out if a block has a small or a large grid version, you can press that same number on your hotbar again, and it will say, if there's no availability for the other grid size, large ship basic refinery is not available for a small ship. But if we go to the solar panel, and I click that button, it'll change to the small grid variant. You can tell which one you have selected by looking down on the HUD at the little icons that sit just below the 7 and 8 hotbar slots. You can also tell on the right where it shows what components are. There'll be those same icons just above there when you're looking at the small grid version or the large grid version. And you can see them changing as I switch. There's another key you can use to change these, which is R. It will also change between grid sizes. So we've got our basic refinery. Let's order up the parts for our basic assembler. We're going to need to add that to our hotbar. I'm going to remove the basic refinery because I'm not going to be likely to build another one of those terribly soon. And we're going to get our basic assembler, which is under this group with the little plus. So I can drag that onto my hotbar, or I can right click and add that to my hotbar. Then I can scroll away from the assembler because I can't make some of the bits that are required for those, and go to the basic one. We need 60 steel plate, 40 construction components, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 motors, 4 displays, and 80 computers. Once that's all made, we'll have ourselves a basic assembler. And it looks like we need a little bit more iron, so let's go grab some more iron from our basic refinery and pop it into our survival kit. While all these components are being built, I'm going to use my rover and I'm going to go collect some silicon from a little further away. To make sure I know exactly where my base is, I'm first going to create a GPS/GPS home, and I'm going to go to the GPS tab, select that home marker, I'm going to give it a different color. I'm going to make it greenish. That way, that one's always going to highlight to me as different to the other one, so I'll remember where home is and make it much easier to find, especially if you leave a few too many of them up on your HUD. I want to collect a bit of silicon because we're going to need a lot for our algae farms. If you're driving at night, like I am, and you're finding that you can't see much, drive slower, but also park your car, open up your control panel, find the lights, select both of them with control click, and turn up the radius. That's going to give you a bit better visibility. If you're finding that that's a little bit too bright, you can turn down the intensity. Personally, I like it somewhere around 2.5. Then we can drive away, and we can see a little bit more around us. If we drive through some of these bits with the grass, we may even get lucky, and it is kind of luck at night, and spot some food, but no such luck. Aha! I have been alive so long that I have gained a survivor buff. If you ever want to check what your buffs are, as it says on the tooltip up there, press Shift B. This will tell you what your maximum health is, what your welding speed is, grinding movement, and oxygen consumption. The longer your character stays alive, the better those buffs will get, up to a cap. So, as best as we can, we're going to try not to die. I'm going to dig down here to the silicon, but because I've just made a hole in the ground and I've been driving around with a rover and I'd rather not drive into the hole, I'm going to make a specific GPS for this. So I'm going to go GPS SI mine, because I know there's a hole here now. That'll hopefully prevent me from driving straight into the hole, even if I'm driving at night and can't see it. So that's going to give us about 5.5, maybe 5.8 even, thousand silicon ore, which is going to be enough for our purposes for the beginning of our base. And we are home. Don't drive into the hole. So we'll drop this silicon into the refinery so it can start being processed. I'll grab the other bit out of the cockpit as well. This little port on the front is a cargo access as well, so we can use that to access directly to the cockpit. And now we can grab all the components from the survival kit in order to make our basic assembler. With the basic assembler, it has a cargo port on only one side. In order to have the basic assembler able to access the materials from the basic refinery, we want its conveyor port to line up to the conveyor port on the basic refinery. So once we've got it snapping to the refinery, we can see that this is not aligning because we can see the port. So we're going to move it around once and once more and then place it. Once we've welded it up, we can walk around to the front of the basic refinery and check that we have the assembler correctly placed by trying to drag the silicon into its ingots inventory at the top here. These symbols you can see on the inventory slots indicate what type of materials they can hold. They are restricted to certain materials. So this symbol is for ores, this symbol for ingots, this symbol usually means you can put anything there. What I'm going to do now is go back to my survival kit and I'm going to grab out all the materials, the ingots, from it. We'll even grab the gravel for the moment, but because we have no use for gravel right now, I'm going to throw it on the ground. Just throw it away. It's taking up inventory space that we don't need it to occupy. Then we're going to drop all of this in with Alt middle mouse. Now that we've got the basic refinery and assembler built, we can start building our algae farms to ensure that we don't starve, because we're going to need them built before the sun comes up so that we can maximize the amount of food they produce during daytime. So let's have a look. We'll go to our G menu again. We're going to find our farms, which are just here. If you can't find something easily in this list, just use the text search at the top and we can search for algae. I'm going to drag this onto my hotbar. We're not going to be building solar panels anytime soon, so I'll cover that up and replace it. And we can see that we need quite a lot of stuff to make these. So let's order that up. Just like the other blocks, we don't necessarily need to build that top row of bulletproof glass. You can get away without it. The block will still be functional, it just won't be as durable. And now if we have a look at our production menu, we can see, because we've got a basic assembler, we now have more things that we can make. And that's going to allow us to produce more stuff, particularly batteries. So once we've got these farms made, that's probably going to be our next step. Unlike the survival kit, we don't have all our ingots sitting in the storage of the assembler. Some of them are sitting in the basic refinery. So using our required available won't necessarily tell us exactly how much we have, because the assembler only pulls materials as it needs them. As you can see, this has been red the whole time, but we're still getting all the parts. So you may need to have a look at that and be like, okay, there's this much required and available. Let's have a look at my inventory. Oh yeah, I've got enough. Or, oh no, I should probably go down and mine some more iron. So I'll grab the materials for the first of our farms and we'll start placing them out. If we have a look at the algae farm, you can see that it has a conveyor port on the bottom. That's it. We want this to be hooked up to our conveyor system, but we don't need that to be done for it to produce food. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this to my tower, but not directly like that. Instead, I'm going to rotate it up like this, leaving myself a full block space underneath to build the conveyors to conveyor it up after I've made the farms. So we'll place 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to place 6. I think you can usually get away with 4 static ones, as in ones that aren't tracking the sun. 5 is a bit of safety margin, and 6 is you're going to be fine. So we'll go with 6 just to make sure that if we accidentally destroy some of our food, we still shouldn't starve. When we weld up the algae farm, we will get, again, that message saying that we have unlocked new blocks. And that's good because the algae isn't edible directly. We're going to have to turn it into food once we've grown the algae. And that'll be done through the food processor, which we just unlocked. Now our production stopped, we've run out of iron, so I'm going to go down and mine some more. Now I just put some iron in here. It's going to get placed after the silicon in the refinery. I don't want the silicon to be processed first. I want the iron to be processed first because I need the iron right now. Although it looks like I need both. But if I want the iron to be processed first, I need to drag it to the front of the queue. And then it'll get processed first, and eventually once the iron and stone are done, the silicon will be processed next. One thing worth noting about settling down and me choosing to be on top of an iron deposit. If you've found silicon and it's getting very dark and you're not able to find any more deposits, settle down on the silicon and just mine stone. You'll be able to get enough iron to build what you need. It's just going to take a few more trips. But you should be able to get everything you need if you've found the silicon. The reason I say the silicon is a bit more important is that these require a lot of glass, and you don't get an awful lot of silicon from stone. So I feel like when you're starting out, the iron is less important than the silicon. If we have a look at this first farm, you can see that it requires an input of power, which is significant, and it has a current efficiency level of 0%, with current progress on its next bit of algae of also 0%. These will change once the sun rises in the east. Noting that this consumes a fair bit of power, we might want to have a look at how much power our wind turbines are producing. Each one of these has a max output of 456 kilowatts at the current wind level, and the current wind level is moderate. So we got 456 each. That's pretty good. The reason the current output is not the max is because I'm not pulling that power. I'm not pulling in that much. The refinery is working, it's pulling in 330. The assembler isn't, but it can pull in 280. So at the moment, I'm only pulling in 117. If you have a look at your wind turbines and you notice that the max output is high, but the current output is low, and you're wondering why your assembler still isn't working, make sure you can see your assembler in this list on the left. If it's not there, your wind turbine is not connected to the same blocks, the same grid as your assembler. And this is always something worth checking whenever you think, why isn't this block working? Why isn't it showing up? Check to make sure that it's showing up in the same control panel as the one you think it's connected to, because it might not be. If you find that you're waiting on the silicon to be refined for the glass, but you'd like these other components to be made, what you can do is you can go to the inventory, you can drag your iron into the assembler, and then while it's waiting for the silicon for the glass, it'll make the other bits. Often the assembler will do this for itself, but sometimes you might need to give it a little bit of a kick up the backside to get a move on. My food has just dipped into the red. As that gets lower, I'm going to start noticing some things that might get a bit annoying. The main one being, once it gets low enough, I'm not going to be able to sprint. Normally you can sprint by holding down shift and moving, and that gets you up to 10 meters a second-ish. A little bit faster as you survive longer. But once my food is low enough, it's going to stop me from doing that. To get our food back up at the moment, we're going to have to go and start eating into our supplies that are in our cockpit. Cargo conveyor port on the front. Grab our kelp crisps. We need to move them into our inventory, and once in our inventory we can right-click to consume them. They're thin, crunchy wafers made from processed algae. We can only right-click on one at a time. It will then add 12% to our food bar, gradually. You can also see that my power bar...
Energy critical.
Thank you, suit lady, is low. I can either refill that by hopping in the cockpit, or I can walk around to my survival kit and hold down F on this little screen here. That's going to fill up my power, and if this survival kit is connected to an oxygen supply and a hydrogen supply, it'll also refill those. And one thing it will do that the cockpit cannot is it will also refill my health. Say, for example, I'm flying and I drop from a little bit too high. Or a little bit higher than that. Ow. To refill that, I can go to the survival kit and it will fill up. The cockpit won't do that. So the survival kit has that little advantage to it. And with that, we have all 6 of the algae farms made and ready for sunrise. Now that that's done, let's get a battery on our base to ensure that we have a more stable power supply and give us an option that would be nice for our rover, which is to remove the survival kit and put some cargo in its place. To add a battery, we're going to go to our block menu again, search for battery, grab the one with the little plus symbol. Don't need landing gear at the moment. We're going to build a large grid battery. This is going to require a fair bit of stuff. So let's add that to our build queue. Since batteries are something you probably don't want to have taking damage, we're going to build all of the parts for this one. So that's 80 steel plate, 30 construction components, 80 power cells, and 25 computers. We have a look at our production. We need 600 ingots of iron, 28 silicon wafer, and 53 nickel. How much nickel do we have? Oh good, we have enough. And we should have enough silicon by the time this is processed. What we're short of is the iron. So let's move the iron to the front of the queue and get it processed so that we can get all this built. And then we'll have a battery. The particular positions of the blocks on my base are not set in stone. You don't have to follow it perfectly. The only things that are important here are the positions of these algae farms. The reason I've laid them out in a line from left to right like this. Ah! Interrupt my speech. Get away, doggo. Go. Oh, there's two of you. That's not good. Okay. I've dealt with the doggos. And we'll get distracted by them for a second because they carry meat. You may notice when you highlight the dog that it won't show any inventory. You need to click on this little interacted item inventory option. You'll then get 2 or 3 raw mammal meat from each wolf. I'm going to pop these in my cockpit just so we can save them for later, as they are something that we cannot consume raw, but once we build our cooking machine, we'll be able to cook them and use them to supply us with food for a little bit longer. So back to what I was saying about the algae farms. Thank you for interrupting, doggos. I want to make sure that each of these farms does not shade the other. So that's why I made sure that we're looking towards the east. And you can see the sun is starting to lighten up the sky over there. It's going to be pretty much looking straight at the sun, and it'll go straight over the top of them, and then looking at the sun again. This means that these can maximize their production, making our food supply more secure. The reason I bring that up now is that the battery doesn't really matter where it goes. I kind of like to put them a bit in the ground or a bit on the floor, just somewhere that feels a bit more secure. So that we can see that power bars, I'm going to place it here and weld it up. It's going to take a few loads to weld up a battery because power cells are bulky. Okay, and all the bits are in, now we have a battery. The reason we want a battery on the base is precisely because wind is not stable. If we have a look at our power situation again, we can look at our wind turbines and we'll see that their max output is now the same as their current output because they are putting all of their effort into charging this battery. If wind output were to drop for a while, the battery can then output the power needed for the algae farms to keep them going, but also to the basic assembler and refinery to keep them going. And with a safe power supply on our base, we could, if we wanted to, move our survival kit onto it. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a conveyor system to connect all of these algae farms to another food block, which is the food processor. I'm going to drag this down onto my hotbar to replace the algae farm, because as you can see, it's another one of these blocks with the little plus symbol, and under this group, we have the algae farm. So I may as well have just this block on my hotbar instead of the algae farm, because I can just scroll between each of them to get the block that I want. Now the food processor has a few different conveyor ports. It has a top, a back, and a bottom. So I could connect this directly to a farm like that. But then this one next to it, I'd need to bring a line of conveyors around to the back of it. So instead of that, I'm just going to build a line of conveyors all the way along the bottom. So let's go to our G menu and let's search for conveyor. It's not there. That's not because I mistyped. That's because under the progression tree, we can see that conveyor requires something I haven't made yet. Oh, I need to make a cargo container. Cool, we can do that. Let's go to our second hotbar by pressing Control 2, and let's add a cargo container. So we'll search cargo, grab this one with the plus on it, put it in slot 1. If we look at our cargo container in large grid, you can see that it has quite a long components list, and it includes something we haven't made yet. Metal grids. If we go up to here, and we go to our production window for our basic assembler, we can see what's required to make metal grids. Cobalt. Dogs! Why are you interrupting me so much? Oi. Sit. Oh, I said sit, not play dead. Thanks for bringing some meat, though. Now, where was I? That's right. Metal grids require cobalt. We haven't got any cobalt, but that's not going to stop us unlocking conveyors, because we can change to small grid of these and see that we only need a few interior plate, construction components, computers, motors, and displays, all of which we can make quite easily right now. So we'll make a couple of those. We'll grab those from the assembler. We'll wander over to our rover here and we'll just slap one on. Doesn't matter where, because we're going to grind it straight off again. Weld it up. And you'll see by building small cargo container, you have unlocked new blocks. Grind it back off, making sure we don't grind our survival kit. If you do accidentally grind your survival kit and take some of the components out, as long as your inventory is not full, they will be in your inventory, which means you can just grab your welder back out and weld it straight back up again, no problems. When you grind down blocks, you get back all of the components, except for batteries. Batteries, you lose the power cells when you grind them down, but the rest of them you will get back. Now, because those dogs keep biting me, I'm going to get my health back. So now we need to make the parts for conveyors. Let's add those to our hotbar. G, search for conveyor. Now I'm looking again for where those ones with the plus are. And there are 3 options I can see. This one is part of a DLC, so we'll just ignore it for now. This one is a large and small grid type of conveyor, so we're going to right click and add it to our hotbar. This one is a small grid conveyor type only. We're going to add it to our hotbar, but we're probably not going to use it for a while. So we'll go back to our large conveyor. We'll have a look at what we need. So in order to connect these up to each other and to the food processor, we're going to need a junction here, but then we can probably use T-pieces for the rest of it, like this. Now I've still got the interior plate that I made for the cargo container in my inventory, which is why I'm able to place these blocks down. We're going to need a lot of parts. I'm not going to bother remembering exactly what. I'm just going to remember that I need a lot. So I'm going to make 200 interior plate. We'll make 200 small steel tubes. We'll make like 50 motors. And we'll make, say, 200 construction components as well. We may need a few more when we get to the end. We'll see. Dogs! Oh, I'm onto my last magazine. If you are starting to run low on ammunition, you can get more. For this basic pistol, the ammunition is quite affordable. We go to our production menu and we select our ammunition tab. You can get the S10 pistol magazines. So let's make another 10 of those. I would like them sooner rather than later, just in case another dog shows up, so I'm going to move them to the front of the queue. We can see also that we need 100 nickel ingots. We don't have that much nickel to produce the stuff that I ordered. So we're either going to need to find some nickel mine near here, or just mine a ton of stone. I think let's go to the nickel mine as soon as we've got this ammo. There we go, 10 ammo. Let's go grab just a load of nickel, as that's going to make things a lot easier. Also, I now can't sprint. You can see that my food highlights every time I hit shift, and I get that "you just got the wrong answer" noise. So I'm going to fix that by grabbing more of my kelp crisp and eating some with right click. Let's go to our nickel mine, we'll grab a load, and by the time we get back, I think our algae farms will be growing some algae, because that sun looks like it's just about to peek over the horizon. So there we go, nickel looks like this. Once you find it, we'll grab a suit load, maybe even the cockpit load as well, just so we don't have to come back here too often. This nickel will supply us with what we need for a while, I think. Look at that, the sun is up. Our algae farms should be happy. And we can take this load of nickel back, and that should be comfortably enough for us to make those conveyors and start building our food processor. Okay, nickel going into refinery, grab the other bits out of the cockpit. And now let's have a look at our algae farms. They've got full 4 green lights because they are fully lit up, and all of them are, which means they're not blocking each other. Let's have a look at what they say in their control panel. We can see that it says current efficiency level 100%. Perfect. That won't be so great when it gets towards the middle of the day, but at least it's good for now. Current progress 7%. Oh, we got efficiency of 103%. Nice. And next output in 3 minutes. If we have a look at our inventory, all of them have some algae in them, which means we've got enough already to produce 1 crisp. But rather than having to collect the algae from each of these individually, which we could do by just going into the inventory here, grabbing it by hand and putting it in the food processor, we are going to build these conveyors first. In an ideal world, I might not have put that deeply underground because it's a bit awkward to get at, but it'll be okay. And by building conveyor, you have unlocked new blocks. We could have a look in the G menu to see what that is. If we search for conveyor, I've now unlocked the ability to build collectors, connectors, and other things that are useful like that. But we're not going to use any of those today. And there we go. All the conveyor tubes are done. We can now build our food processor. Then we're going to need to make the parts for that. We have a food processor, and now we can go to the production tab, and we'll see that we've got the food processor here. If we go to this drop-down tab, we can change to the basic assembler, change back. On this tab, we have the food items that we can cook. And on this tab, we have the conversion of food items into seeds to grow them later. For now, what we want is the cooking page, and we're going to queue up a whole bunch of kelp crisps because we're going to basically want these produced whenever there's enough algae to make them. So let's just queue up 1,000. Control, Shift, left click. It's going to automatically drag the algae from the algae farms into the food processor in order to make those. If we go to the inventory of it, you'll see that it's already produced us 4 kelp crisps. So I'm going to put them in my own inventory, and I'm going to eat one since I am hungry and I can't sprint, and it'd be nice to get that back. And then once that one's finished adding to my hunger bar, I'll then chomp down on the next one. It won't let me do that until the previous one has ended, so you can't accidentally waste some of the buff from the food. There we go, have another one, and I can get my hunger bar back up to full. So the last thing we're going to do today is we're going to move our survival kit onto our base. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to my hotbar the survival kit. It's down here, I'm going to right click, and to build this survival kit onto our base, we are going to have to remove the one on our truck. The reason for that is, as you can see here, survival kits require medical components. If I have a look in my production queue here, they require silver. Now you think, okay, I found silver earlier. That's fine. No. The basic refinery, it can't refine silver. So we have no means to actually produce those medical components just yet. We're going to need a full refinery before we can do that, and that's a fairly expensive undertaking at the moment. So for now, what we're going to do is remove the survival kit from our rover and place it on the base instead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place it around the back here, connected up to my conveyor line on this side, weld what bits I have into it, and then we'll go grab the rest of the parts from the one on the truck. There'll be a few things in the inventory. Ideally, get those out so they don't drop on the ground. If you happen to leave something in there and it drops, it's not a big deal, as you'll see when this stone drops out. See? No big problem. Just a little package. We can grab the stone. We can also grab these 2 little bits of steel plate that have dropped on the ground. And then we have a rather funny but kind of cool looking rover. Now that this has happened, don't die. Do not die. Really, really don't die. If wolves come while you've done this, that's some really bad luck, and maybe use the reload if you happen to die while you do not have a survival kit. But weld this up immediately. Get it functional again. Do not let yourself die without a survival kit. It's bad. Because you basically have to restart and then drive all the way back here if you want to come back to this base. And with the survival kit welded up, we have a base that is pretty ugly, but really quite functional. We've got a food supply, we've got a power supply, we've got a respawn even if we crash the rover, and we've got a rover that's ready for some upgrades, which I will show a variety of in another video, as well as next time upgrading it and heading towards getting some better gear and a much nicer looking base. If you've got any questions you want to ask or any tips you want to share, let me know, but otherwise I'll be back with another tutorial very soon, and I will see you then.